Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Career Toolkit session. And I'm Angie Mays at the University of Kentucky Libraries.
I'm Megan Vance with DeGreuter.
Hi, I'm Courtney McAllister. I'm at EBSCO.
Thanks. And we're going to walk you through philosophical considerations in considering career crossover across the industry. And we will start with some background information about just transferable skills in general. And there is a large body of literature in all industries and in career literature in itself about planning a career, and that can be a career change or starting a career, and it falls into components that I like to nickname soul searching and planning. And the soul searching is somewhat of inner work and asking yourself, what are your values? What's important to you in a workplace? So, for example, one of my core values is excellence, and I cannot work in a place where people just don't care about good quality work. And I need to be in a place where I'm surrounded by hardworking colleagues because I work hard and I don't want to have a clash of values with regard to work ethic. You know, just for example, and I know all of you have similar core values. And then there's the question of interests and what nature of work, broadly, what fields, what type of work do you like to do? Do you like analytical work, work with people? Do you love research? Do you love performing? Do you love writing? Those types of things. And what is important with regard to quality of life? And there's a large body of work on work-life balance and also work-life integration. And ponder what is important to you. What does the ideal work day, work field look like to you? And what are some of your favorite tasks and aims? I absolutely adore anything dealing with analysis and data and looking for insights across a vast pool of pieces that at first glance look disparate. I also love art, for example. I love to write. I love research. And each of you has something along those lines. And then also do an inventory of your skills. What are your best skills? What are you really good at? Which of those things that you're really good at are found as prominent value features in a lot of different industries, or at least in several industries that you're interested in? And if you're interested in something but maybe don't have the skill that might be deployable in a work setting, what are some learning goals? And then transition planning. Then you're coming into focus a little more. What are your favorite tasks, and what are your aims for your career? What do you want to achieve? Or at the end of your career, or at the end of maybe a year looking back, and you say, I accomplished X, and it's really great that I was able to accomplish X. Ask yourself, what is that? And where can you find application for your best skills? In what industries are they most at home? And if I were to go on my nerdy bent and do an analysis of where are these skills applicable? And you could do the same thing for your best favorite skills. And then a network, going outward a little bit, and maybe your informal brain trust, professional friends, and so you have some target ideas in mind. Who among the people you know knows about that? And who knows about the industries that are homes for your target work? And don't shy away from mentoring and coaching in both ways too. And then plot out some success strategies, and then it'll start crystallizing into ideas and potential leads. So since we are going to focus in, so this is a really huge topic, and we took a manageable slice by moving across, and in this case from libraries onto the business side. And so as the three of us were talking, we inventoried some skills that are typically found in libraries that are also applicable to the industry side of the work. And these are just some examples, the slides that are online for you. You can see this again. We will also report out on this in the narrative. So these are some examples. And now I'm going to turn this over to Megan, who's going to give you a more in-depth insight from the publisher side.
Hello, again, my name is Megan Vance. I'm with DeGruyter. I'll go ahead and hop to the next one. Basically, I have 8 years in the publishing industry. I've hired within the publishing industry. So I'm going to speak on skills that I've seen translate well from a librarian career into working on the vendor side of things. And currently at DeGruyter, we have 2 librarians out of our Boston office, which is our Americas office. And out of our headquarters in Germany, we also have several librarians on staff. I do want to clarify, this is my personal perspective. It's not the vendor perspective. And I've narrowed it into 5 categories of transferable skills, but obviously there are many more skills that make librarians great candidates. So this is just kind of buckets that I've created. And we are doing a bit of a survey with the Mentimeter, so I'll be curious to hear, and even in the Q&A, if you guys have additional things that maybe I didn't think of that we could add to our list. All right, so the first one, this may be overly obvious, but industry familiarity. If you come to the table with information on authentication methods, counter data, technical services, those are all things that as someone hiring, I don't have to onboard you for that. Anyone in publisher or vendor side of things, they need to have a base knowledge of these things, better yet expertise. So anyone coming to the table with that already established, that's a lot of training that you don't have to do. So an example that I have here is someone with a library background could be able to offer input on streamlining onboarding for a new resource, because they've done that themselves. The next category is marketing. Oh, just making sure it didn't pop up. Oh no, it's doing something strange. Do you mind going over there and just scrolling it manually?
I'll fix it manually. We have to remind the human who's boss, and it's not the machine.
We celebrated too early. We said earlier we'd conquered the machine. It's coming back.
Okay.
Slide 2, marketing.
It's also, this is so strange, it keeps coming here. So,
Maybe if we zoom out a little, or there we go. Marketing. So both librarians and vendors are very well aware that users don't use what they can't find. I would also argue they don't use what they don't know that they have. So libraries are already onboarding users, promoting resources. That's just marketing. That could come in handy in departments like product marketing and user training. A specific example I have here is someone with a library background might know what questions should be addressed in a product FAQ because they've seen where users are going to, what questions come up typically. Go to the next slide there. I guess I could try it again with this. It's realigned. So skill 3, data analysis. This is something which we're talking about things that we enjoy with our jobs. I'm very data heavy. I love getting into usage data and metrics like that. So Excel skills are highly valued across departments. If you can do pivot tables, macros, data visualization, that's highly valued across departments. Enterprise expertise with counter usage data is a key skill. It's a pretty obvious example for customer support. You need to be able to pull those reports just for serving customers, but also an editorial department. I was once asked to run a report. They were looking for the journal to create a specific special issue on a topic. So we looked at the top usage articles for that title for the last year, see if we could find any trends of what topics were getting the most interest, and then made a decision for the editorial side of things from there. And also product development. What features on the site are getting most usage? What's not getting great usage? You might want to do some developments there. So it's a lot of different departments, not just sales or customer support, that look into that data. The next slide. So unique insights. Having a librarian on staff really allows a vendor to get a perspective that they wouldn't otherwise get. A good example is for a librarian in an academic setting, for example. They're interacting with everyone from freshmen to professors, and these could be coming from all over the world. So you guys have an experience that's really unique and gives you a unique perspective. This could translate well into positions related to equability, DEI, and it's really just a unique input to have in the vendor side of things that you really wouldn't get otherwise by not having a librarian on staff. Unique insights continued. This is just some examples. In terms of product development, what features are of interest for an administrator portal? Acquisition strategy, a librarian could speak to for a specific product type. Is subscription or perpetual access preferred? For faculty needs, if you have a background in an academic institution, you could speak about transformative agreements. What are the challenges navigating those for authors at your institution? And maybe what solutions you've seen for addressing pain points with those. In the last category I've deemed this change management, but basically dealing with electronic resources, you have to be primed to deal with change, and librarians have already shown they're very adaptable. Whether it's COVID, changing operational, standards on campus, budget changes, librarians have shown that they have adaptability, and that's a massively attractive skill from a hiring level. Anything from accessibility standards, which are always changing, updates to counter data, transformative offerings and models. So I just wanted to highlight this as a skill that I'm not sure if everyone's aware of how attractive this is when you're hiring, but it's something I definitely look for. And some sub-skills I have here are multitasking, because as things change, you constantly have to reprioritize what's highest importance. And then digital literacy, just staying on top of electronic updates and making sure, I remember back in the day we used to just have PDF, and now we have EPUB, we have EPUB Plus, staying on top of all the different changes. And our next slide is basically a summary of an example job. So this is just to give you an idea of, if you saw this title, some different, basically getting you thinking about how you would approach that job listing, and then I'm going to go into the specific example of someone we have at DeGruyter working in this position. So the real world example, it's one of our librarians on staff out of our Americas office. It's called Manager of Library Services. So this is someone with an MLS degree, and her job duties include, but are not limited to, customer onboarding. She represents customers to our partner presses. She manages all of our title lists, and that is a huge project. We have not just DeGruyter titles on our platform, but also we have 20 partner presses, and titles get added daily. So it's a massive amount of content, and I don't know where we would be without her keeping track of it, ensuring our discovery services have the most current title lists for different packages. It is a massive task. And I would argue all of the transferable skills that I've just quickly ran through, they tie into her position. And she's a great example of transitioning from working as a librarian to then working on the vendor side of things and using those skills in a different way.
So, and part of this exercise, I'll leave this up for a couple of minutes so that you can think and reflect on how you would go through inventorying your skills and interests to apply for a position written this way. And a sneak preview, we will have a question in our live poll about skill inventory. Are you ready to see the next one?
Okay, so I think we can move to the next one.
Okay, I see nods.
So now I'm going to pass it over to Courtney to speak about her experience as someone with library background now working on the vendor side of things.
Thanks so much. I am a library services engineer at EBSCO, I just wanted to share briefly my experience going from a library staff member to a librarian to someone now working in a vendor role. So this is kind of like campfire story time. Let's pretend the donuts are s'mores and we're all just gathered around. I wouldn't necessarily consider my experience indicative of everyone's, but just here to kind of share some insights and reflect on the skills that Megan and Angie have been talking about. So I started out working in libraries very early. I was in high school and I volunteered at my local public library helping with children's programming. And then I started as a shelver and I shelved books, and I did that all through college as well as my part-time job. Then I went away and got a master's in something completely unrelated. Ended up boomeranging, coming back home, because it was not a great time to be on the market with a master's in international performance research. So I got back into libraries and I started doing reference services, helping with the public access computers, getting more into those kinds of roles and services. And then I transitioned to an academic library role. I actually worked not too far from where we are right now. I was at the Citadel, and I worked in interlibrary loan and circulation until I ended up going back to school, getting my library degree, where I eventually, became the e-resources librarian at the Citadel. And throughout that time, of course, more acquisitions responsibilities, more technology requirements, learning how to manage a proxy. That was a fun experience. So just kind of evolving as the position was changing and my skills were also kind of developing in new ways. Then I ended up as the e-resources librarian at Yale Law. And I did that for 2 years and then transitioned over to EBSCO in 2020. So I was drawn to this position that I have now for a couple of reasons. I didn't set out with that kind of clarity that Angie was talking about, where you reflect on where you want to go. I've been much more just reactive, honestly, in terms of, oh, I would like to learn that, or oh, I would like to know that. I don't necessarily have that holistic framework that has been governing my career thus far. I would really like to get a little more discipline in that area. But I was drawn to the library services engineer role because my career, my pathway in libraries had taken me into so many different areas of the work. I'd worked circulation, I'd done reference, I'd done information literacy, instruction, and been a liaison, done ILL, all of these different things. And I wanted a position that leveraged all of that and kind of saw it as an asset to have such a broad frame of reference. I also was really eager and excited for an opportunity that would put me in a position to work with a lot of different kinds of libraries and librarians. I've been very fortunate. I've gotten to work at a lot of different kinds of institutions, from military college to, an Ivy League legal institution, law institution. But there's so much happening in the field, in the wider world, that I was oblivious to. And in my current role, I work with libraries in academic, public, K through 12, and also Canadian government sites. So I get a lot of exposure to the different issues and challenges and trends, and I find that just really compelling to keep learning in that way. My other primary motivator was a desire to upskill in technology. As my path developed in libraries, I saw that increased emphasis on technology skill acquisition. And while I had kind of been able to rise to the challenges, I didn't feel like I had a lot of more formal training. It was stuff that I learned on the fly as needed. So I was eager for an opportunity to learn more about JavaScript and jQuery and learn how to do some app development, learn how to manage repos on GitHub, things that I'd heard about that seemed very kind of outside the realm of possibility. So it was an opportunity to upskill. The other kind of compelling factor for me was that the other library service engineers are all also coming from library backgrounds. So it didn't feel like I would have to kind of sacrifice my identity as a library worker, because that was something that was really important to me. And actually working on the vendor side, not to get too saccharine, has deepened my appreciation for the work of libraries and librarians, because I see so much more than I did before, just within my own kind of frame of reference. So reflecting back on the skills and the insights that Angie and Megan were talking about, some things that I would have really benefited from, that table that Angie showed, where you're translating the librarian skills to their counterparts in other industries. It can be really challenging to know how to articulate the skills that you have and frame them in a way that resonate with another field or another industry. You know, conducting a reference interview, that's something, you know, everyone here knows how to do and can do it with a lot of grace and aplomb. But the person who's reviewing your application may not know what a reference interview means, may not know how much kind of assessment and on-the-fly question and analysis that takes to help someone refine their topic and then find sources to match it. So then you might have to call it, you know, consultative solution assessment or something. You know, you may have to use a different terminology so that that value is something that they can perceive. So having that that framework to translate your skills into something that's perhaps a bit more recognizable or resonant for the other industry is really helpful. I think that can also help curb the insidious imposter syndrome. I'll be very honest with you. I have felt that for many months in the new position because I didn't feel like the perfect fit, right? I didn't check all the boxes. Some of the match points were a little fuzzy, and it kind of I got in my own head about it. But when you think about everything that librarians know how to do and learn as they go, really are a strong match for a lot of these positions that we see posted in other fields and industries. And going back to that comment earlier about adaptability, one of the things that has helped in my particular situation is keeping in mind all of those moments where something came that was a new request or a new technology or something that we weren't familiar with, either individually or as a team, and we were able to figure it out. We were able to learn it. We were using, you know, that expertise on listservs, or we were looking up things, and that ability to continuously learn and develop new skills is really, really powerful. And it's something I think, you know, we may not give ourselves enough credit for in libraries, because it is a tremendous advantage in a lot of different fields, and something that can really carry you into, you know, whatever career you have your mind on. So yeah, that's just a bit of my experience, my kind of circuitous pathway into a vendor role. Happy to answer any questions or talk more about things like the identity aspects of going from library worker to vendor, or any of those other kind of surrounding issues. That's my story, I guess.
Thank you so much. I
And
think
I'm going to show the other job out that you had given us quite the...
we have a similar slide that basically is summarizing kind of what her position would look like if you saw it in a job listing. Just kind of thinking of what skills would you frame. You have that great example of, would you say, content? What was the more approachable rather than the reference?
What did I say? Consultative solution mapping.
That's fantastic. That's marketing of your skills into a way that the employer, if they're not familiar with the more librarian task or skill that you're talking about, making it more marketable to a variety of interviewers looking at your profile.
So, and I'll just give you a couple of minutes to look at this ad, and as with the other one, reflect on how you would inventory your skills and interests with a view to applying for a position that's written this way.
One observation I've made recently is I see the brightest and the top students in library schools right now attracted to these kinds of positions. And I don't feel the academic library marketplace is really getting the cream of the crop anymore because of a variety of things. And we all know what, have ideas of what those things are. And one thing that I see is in an academic job profile ad of a similar level, let's say, I would expect a lot of discussion in the cover letter or something to identify how people practice whatever these elements are. And that's not necessarily sought after in the commercial environment. And I guess you're either fit to do it or they can test to whether you have the ability to do it or not. But maybe we're not so gifted in the academic realm and we're open to people practicing in different ways. And not everyone's going to teach the same methods or the same style, and that's okay. And it seems to be less okay in the structured environment that there's, people are growing in different ways and there's new opportunities, but it's a little bit different. And then I think we also emphasize in the academic world an understanding of the enterprise. And that's very hard for people who don't have, especially early career people who don't have work experience. And I think, and how do you appreciate that? Because we used to assume that they had it by osmosis, taking courses. But as those courses are replaced with new content and new curriculum, that might be perhaps more valuable or whatever. But I'm finding that we have to educate candidates about the enterprise, the academic enterprise. And that's a real fundamental difference of how that operates. And, so I think that's sort of the disconnect I find. But I find that this is, to me, it seems very overly simplified coming from the academic situation rather than, but it's very concise. So it has benefits.
Well, it's also for illustration purposes for the session, but you've actually touched on maybe crisis is too melodramatic a word, but there's a real disconnect between library schools, teachings, the curricula, and the real world, how it happens on the ground in libraries. And there's a whole large body of literature, and I wish we had enough time to really unpack that because it is something we need to address as a profession.
One thing that I found particularly interesting interviewing with academic libraries and then interviewing for a vendor position was how much shorter the timeline was for the vendor position. Like, it was not 2 days on site, and their decision came very promptly. And I mean, in terms of just the bureaucracy, it was very pared down. So some of the competition, in my perspective, is we're also, always trying to recruit and deal with the hiring competition. Really good candidates get snapped up. And I think sometimes the issue for academic hiring is the process takes a long time. And while you're waiting for this to get approval from the provost or this XYZ form to be submitted, another agency, another actor has stepped in and gotten your candidate. So I think sometimes vendors have a bit more agility and can move a bit brisker than academic organizations. I don't know, Mecca, does that resonate for you as well?
Yeah, I definitely agree there. Absolutely. Well, yeah, it is interesting to hear about the different processes and, the time that it may take versus, for corporate publisher, they can move more swiftly on things like that. Yeah, definitely. That's similar to my experience as well.
Yeah, corporate is more fast moving. Well, we are going to engage you now, and we have a live poll that we would like to share with you, and then I've set it up to be self-paced, so those of you who are super fast aren't thinking, why won't this slow girl move the slide already? And those of you who would like more time to reflect actually have the time to move forward at your own pace. And I will show the results on the live screen. And here comes the URL for the live poll. And so here are the reflection questions, but you'll see them again in the actual poll. Sorry, moved too fast. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay.
And we are going to keep this open, I believe, between now and the virtual session as well. So
Yes.
if you want to think on it for a bit and maybe later tonight you're like, oh, I remember that, and go to the slides and fill it in after you've had some time to think about it, that's fun as well.
Absolutely.
But I do think it's a good opportunity, just even with our panel, the variety of people we have in the room, to kind of ask these questions and get some answers. And you know, we might hear some things, some different areas of skills that we hadn't covered or even thought of. So I think conference was just a great opportunity to kind of survey in addition to doing our presentation.
So has everyone found the poll on your devices? Okay, I will move to the presentation slide now.
Looks like it's pulling some data now.
Yeah, very good.
So we'll scroll through some of the results here. But again, we are going to have this open, so it may not have everyone's answers right away. And when we redo this as part of the virtual session, we're going to get those people's input as well.
And one thing that you'll see at the end of your responses is you'll get a URL to see the real-time cumulative results to all these questions. And we are also going to report out on the poll entries in our post-conference paper. So this isn't a one-time chance to see results like a Snapchat. It won't disappear.
I mentioned I'm very into the data, so I'm very curious to even just see from the in-person, the virtual attendees, like if there's a change in trends.
Okay. Just feel free to scroll forward.
Sure. Wow, I'm looking at, have you considered a career position change in the last 2 years? Looks like 3 out of 4 are yes. And for some of these questions, you'll see there's a yes, no, and then there's an other box if you don't quite fit into one of those selected areas. But I guess while we're doing this, we could also maybe open it up to questions. We can pass the mic around and answer you from over there, but we do want this to be a lively discussion, so I appreciate the input and any questions or comments you guys might have for us. Maybe you could come up into the little aisleway here and we'll bring you the mic, or we can pass it around.
I can't see sideways very well.
Here, do you want to keep scrolling?
So it looks like there's some,
Still.
well, and still answering questions. and we can see it ourselves.
We're not at the best angle to see all this stuff as it comes in. We're trying to pull it through on the phone here as well, but I appreciate you guys putting the information in there.
So seeing each other's responses, is that giving you some new ideas?
Again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to pass the mic around. We can wait until we've got more results in the data.
Question.
Hi, I have a question, and it's not well formed, but I'm like one of those librarians that transitioned out of academia pretty quickly. But did you all, or just from talking with people or in your own experience, did you feel like promotion was a bit clearer or just different in a corporate setting than it was in an academic setting? Were the expectations different or better or just more transparent at all? Or I guess what was that experience like for you?
Hi. So that's a great question. In my experience, I actually had more transparency about advancement on the academic side because I was tenure track or had promotion in place. But there were a lot of expectations for what I call extracurricular work. You know, you would have to do a lot of things outside of your regular job to make those benchmarks. But there was more structure involved with it. In my team currently, it's fairly flat, but there isn't the same pressure to be, you know, publish or perish. So I would say that goes back to the quality of life question that Angie raised earlier in terms of, you know, how do you want to be spending your time or what are your kind of values or priorities there? And there may be other corporate roles that have more kind of promotional definition than my particular team. So I'd also be curious to hear Megan's insights there. But for me personally, comparing it with the academic kind of track, there was more transparency, but also more pressure, if that makes sense. Musical chairs.
Yeah, sorry. Musical microphones. I was just going to say, I have less experience on the academic side of things, but I would say on the vendor side of things, things like, you know, having your annual reviews, your goals, everything's very clear cut, especially more on the corporate side of things. So my assumption is on the academic side, there can be more vagaries with that. On the corporate side, you might have a better idea of in the hierarchy where your trajectory could go theoretically, but it sounds like your experience is more on when it was on the academic side, you didn't have as much of that transparency or like clear direction. Is that right?
Yeah, in some ways. Or there was, thank you. In some ways, or like there was a feeling, I think we had like tiers, so librarian 1, 2, 3, whatever.
Right.
And people felt like you hit a ceiling. There's nowhere else to go.
Right.
And so you have to be satisfied with that or go to a different state or something like that. And so I'm wondering if people experience that same kind of ceiling working with a vendor or, you know, in a corporate setting in any way.
I will say, especially with smaller publishers, some are small shops, small association publishers, things like that. Yeah, it just, if there aren't a lot of openings, if no one's retiring, there's just limited, they don't invent positions. They try to be lean and operational and yeah, sometimes you can kind of max out, and it's similar, it's, you know, if you want to go upward, you kind of have to look at different options. But in a bigger organization that's worldwide and has offices on different continents, I mean, you could look at different divisions that might have different opportunities if your department is maxed out. So I definitely say the bigger the company, it seems, in my experience, it seems to be more opportunities, but I don't know if that's the universal rule, but that's my experience. I don't think we have another question.
My question's for Megan. So, of course, I went right to open positions to see what was there, and I noticed that the salaries are not transparent. At what point do you share what the salaries are for a candidate?
I am not as familiar with the HR side of things, and how those positions are posted, but I can definitely check on that. I know, especially in the US, I want to say New York just passed something where you have to post it. Just personally, something I support. I think California already did it. With an international company, I'm not sure if it's the laws of the home base company, like the headquarters office that dictates that. So in terms of ours at DeGruyter, I would have to check on that. But I also, there are certain positions open. I will say when I was talking with Angie about this topic in the summer, I did not know that there were going to be positions open and things like that when I joined the session, but I was happy to see that there are some openings, so it's kind of relevant. But yeah, I can definitely check with you on that. And my email information is in the slides as well, or I can touch base with you afterwards and check back with you after I check with our HR on what the policy is on that, and is it changing with some of these state rules within the US changing? It's a great question, though. Any other questions? Or experience, is anyone out in the room, like maybe if you feel comfortable, show of hands, transition from
Thank you.
library into the, I know Whitney has, and you have as well. Awesome.
So, thanks for holding this today. Just some thoughts that come to mind. What about like those with more experience, or I mean, is this held against or in favor? I mean, again, we see many things out there where, yeah, library school student, 3 to 5 years experience, and that's valuable as well. And I've even seen things out there where the employer wants, well, MBA degree, and, that's part of sales too. Then there are these HR departments that do a lot of screening ahead of time, or resume CV advisors may advise on, well, your CV is too long. You have a ORCID ID and these things in there, so it can work for you or against you. And I'm throwing some stuff at you, but kind of concurring what was someone spoke about a few minutes ago. And then also on your end, there are sales, but you do have quote, markets, unquote. So like, the legal librarians or health sciences or you name it, anthropology or it just thoughts off the top of my head. But thank you for holding this today. It's valuable for people to think about this. So.
Yeah. Oh, well, I was just thinking someone with a law library background would be great for working in like contracts and licensing. Like that would be a very minimal use of their experience, but that's something I hadn't even thought of for the presentation. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
So I can answer this question from the perspective of a hiring manager. So if I'm on a search committee or filling a position as a manager, I look at what is the purpose of the position and what would be success criteria in the sense of what should one be able to do well in order to succeed in this role. And then, my approach is to look at the whole person because, for example, if someone wants credentials, and then there's a lot of literature about ageism or you're overqualified, which is a euphemism sometimes, and then they want all these long, this long collection of multiple graduate degrees. Well, nobody is born with an instant MBA. It takes time, and it takes time to gather experience and for someone's wisdom to unfold. And it's not only important to have background knowledge, know how to do something. So what if I'm really fabulous at strategy and good at crunching numbers, but what if I'm a total jerk and a nightmare to work with? Then I wouldn't bring much success to the work that should be done in a position that I hold. And so someone who has more experience has lived long enough to have collected some observations and seen how human nature really works, what makes workplace relationships successful, what are some good ways to go about collaborating together and understanding others that you're working with and getting inside someone else's point of view, and all that has value. And maturation does not happen early on in life, and so this is a lengthy way of saying that it's really important to look at the whole person. What qualities does that person bring to the table, and forget about the length of the resume on paper. But back to the length of a resume in CV and academia, an academic curriculum vitae can be very long because that's the culture of the academic institutions. But in business, a resume is typically 2 pages long at the most, and so it's just a very brief distillation. And we saw the flip side of that in the brevity of these companies' position descriptions. And so for someone wanting to move into the business side of work comes the task of translating that richness of experience into very powerful, hard-hitting bullet points to fit within those 2 pages. And there are actually a lot of excellent books and tutorials on resume building. So we don't have to be trying to figure it out on our own.
I would say it's also interesting that I feel a lot of pressure towards brevity in library hiring as well. At one point earlier in my career, I was looking for opportunities in academic libraries, and I had the detailed cover letter and heard crickets. And I talked to a friend in another industry, and they're like, make it 1 page, use bullet points. And I was like, but I'm leaving so much out. What about context? There's an initial screen that's happening. Just try to get in the door, and then you can talk about all of these other things. And so I adopted that practice, and my response rate was very different. So I think some of this flattening is happening in all kind of employment sectors, which is difficult. And I totally agree we should be looking at the whole person. But I think that's something that cuts across a lot of different fields right now.
Right, because in some of these resume files, they don't want to know to put on your resume that you scooped ice cream and, that you did ice cream, scooped ice cream, or you're in the Boy Scouts or something, whoever, Girl Scouts. But going back to that legal, I wasn't trying to give you that idea because some librarians have quite a bit of working with legal counsel to develop and to go off and do negotiating with licensing and doing it from, of course, the library perspective. But if you, the publisher, had a librarian who has done it or been through with, some, 15 different types of publishers that they've had to work with. So I just didn't want to give you the wrong impression. That would be from the librarian. So you could have the legal degree, but that doesn't mean you're knowledgeable about the libraries or academic libraries
Absolutely.
or, you know, public or anyhow. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One aspect that I think is really critical is the role of a cover letter or an introduction paragraph or something, because in the academic world, we scrutinize misspellings or typos or whatever, the whole communication package. We want to make sure that our candidates are really good role models for freshman Freddie and everybody else in the organization and the institution. And this communication, because I think it goes back, if they have faculty status or the academic model, they have to be able to write, publish, and to get out. And so you don't want to hire people who are going to struggle with that, even though there's a lot of help along the way. And I think increasingly there is. And my organization bends over backwards to encourage that success if people are open to it. However, you need strong communication skills in all areas of work. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting to me that when I have reached out to jobs in industry or up the scale, that I'm dealing with headhunters. And that's another layer in the process that doesn't always understand what the client wants, or they recirculate people in their inventory, or they've worked with before who might be eligible for another move or whatever. But it's not as transparent a process, I guess, as what the academic mentality is very open, and that you can find out where you are in the process, even though it takes a long time. So I think that's something that you have to kind of get over and realize that they move fast, and that it's not as open a book.
Yeah, well, and definitely if there's a headhunter involved, that's definitely an added layer. And some publishers use those religiously for certain levels of positions. Some do not. It kind of depends on size of their HR department and vetting and all that, but that's definitely an added layer. We could probably do a whole different presentation on just the difference in dealing with headhunters in general. Any other questions?
Is it different
Working with,
dealing with a headhunter for a lot of these people? Did you get your job through a headhunter?
I've worked with a headhunter before, and I would say they were very familiar with the publishing industry. As long as they're familiar with the industry, and I would say if they're familiar with people with academic background, maybe they could give you the advice on here's how you summarize those experiences for the corporate world to make it bullet points. And then when you get to the interview stage, that's when you're going to go into the details versus having it all up front on the resume. But personally, I never fault anyone for having a long resume. Like, if it's good, relevant experience, like, I want to know about it. But I have heard the 2-page rule. And I do get it, you know, people have short attention spans and things like that, but if you're looking to hire a quality candidate, you should have the attention span to thoroughly go through the applicants and pay attention and see if it's relevant. It shouldn't be, oh, it's 3 pages. So yeah, that's my personal opinion. But.
We need more of that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be around for a little bit if any other questions come up. We do have the link to the slides here, and we will be redoing the session as part of the virtual as well, and posting a paper that will include some of the data results as well. So.